Once the bandsaw was at my house, it sat for a while. Life, work, weather, all contributed to it staying in the driveway for a while.
Looking at this, and my guess is that that is not going into there.
Despite my confidence, it was looking like he was right. I didn't really have a plan to get into the garage. The door was 14 inches too short. I couldn't rent a forklift because there was only about an inch of clearance once we got inside, and the thing still weighed 3,000 pounds. Any problem can be overcome. Are you even recording?
Yeah.
So I did some research. There were a few sites with info, but it wasn't until I checked YouTube and found someone who had the exact opposite problem I did. Duckboatsdotnet posted a video where they needed to get a bandsaw out of a small garage and into a bigger shop. They used a rollover design by Jeff Smith. I messaged them and found out they had laminated together some 2x6s and created a rollover strong enough to hold the bandsaw and be used by 2 people. The key to this was going to be how to make the arc it would roll around. I found a diagram online that listed where the center of gravity of the bandsaw was. It was approximately 35 inches off the ground. If I created a curve around that location, we would be able to tip over the bandsaw with ease. Then it was off to the home center. A few sections of the plan could have been done with 6x6s, but I got all 2x6s because I was going to laminate the curved sections together anyway, so I figured why not? I probably could have saved some time using 2x6s for the larger sections though. I jointed and planed and glued up the boards for the larger back sections. Then I cut the smaller pieces that would make up the main curved section. While I was waiting on those glue ups, I started prepping the bandsaw for moving. First I took the blade off. Then I removed the rear cast iron table. Next, I moved on to the main table, which had to come off for the rollover to work. I knew it was going to be heavy, so I thought I might use this engine hoist to lift it out of the way. There were 4 main bolts holding the table to the trunnions underneath. Trunnions? Yeah, I think that's right. Once I removed them, I thought I could just lift it up and out of the way. It turns out the engine hoist couldn't quite reach all the way to the center of the table, and I did not do the best job of securing it. Fortunately, the table didn't break and was still in good shape. I moved it into the garage and rewrapped the bandsaw. Next up, I tried to dry fit the main pieces to the saw to make sure that it was close to the plan. Once I was happy my measurements were close enough, I made the cuts to create half-lap joints to connect the main 2 pieces for each side. These joints would be glued, but the rest would be bolted together. Then I milled up the boards that would make up the cross members and glued them up for the next day. It was starting to look like Noah's Ark in my shop. The cross members already had a half lap built into the assembly, and all I had to do was drill holes for the bolts that would hold the whole thing together. The only thing I had in that size was a spade bit. It would have been a lot easier with an auger bit, but I didn't have one. I used large threaded rods and nuts because that was the only thing at the home center that was the correct size and length. And of course you have to stress test it along the way. After I put the side members on, I had the feet problem to tackle. The arc in my diagram went all the way to the center of the machine. In Duckboat's video, they had feet that went all the way under the saw, which also took most of the weight. In my situation, that wouldn't work. With only an inch of clearance, I couldn't afford any additional height. So my solution was to cut the feet of the rollover so they would press against the top and side of the bandsaw feet. This wouldn't add any additional height, but would still make an arc around that center of gravity. So I traced the feet of the bandsaw as well as I could onto a piece of cardboard and used it as a template to cut down the rollover's feet. I finished assembling the rollover and lifted it up to the bandsaw, taking care not to hit it because I was paranoid I was going to knock the whole thing over. It was pretty heavy all by itself. Installation day was finally here, and I started by strapping the bandsaw to the rollover with some heavy-duty straps. 2 across the upper arm of the saw and 2 around the feet. Because these straps would be taking all the weight, I didn't want to cut any corners. Once they were attached, I rolled out the engine hoist and strapped it onto it just in case. I was still pretty paranoid about it falling on someone. Because of that, we tried tipping it over with a rope first. Yeah, that didn't work. Instead, I put a board under the saw and put my car jack under that. It slowly started tipping, and the whole time I kept thinking of how much money and time and effort we put into this project so far. All the people who would help me move the behemoth from Manassas all the way to my driveway. And all that would be for nothing if it dropped and broke now. Yeah, it was fine.
Good. Good start.
Once we got the pallet jack underneath it, we tried to start moving it. It turns out, on an asphalt driveway, it is not the best thing to roll around on. It took us a while to get it moving. Every rock, every pebble, every dip stopped it cold. It still weighed 3,000 pounds.
Let's go by the cars and the wagon, okay?
Finally, we got it to a good spot and it rolled the rest of the way in. Once it was in the garage, it was much easier to move around. My cousin and I were very easily able to lift the saw and try and get it into position. Trying to get it into the angle iron cradle was a little challenging. Once we got it close enough though, we noticed it wasn't going to make it. So we decided to remove the top cover and try and clear the ceiling.
It's in!
It's in your life.
Yeah! Woo!
We did it!
And finally, we had to put the table back on. I learned my lesson from the removal, and I asked my brother to help me lift it back on.
All right? Yep.
It was difficult and rather precarious, and I would not do it this way again. But thanks for the help, Brett. It's in the shop, and this 1943 Tannewitz 36-inch bandsaw is not going anywhere anytime soon. Oh! So, as you can see, we've gotten it up and running. It still needs a little bit of tuning, but we'll get to that later. I would really like to thank my two cousins who helped me out with this project. I could not have done it without them. So, until next time,
I'm Ken. I'm Matt.
and I'm Jared for Cutting Out Back. So guys, I got this 5,000-pound lathe that we have to go pick up.
You really better clear it with your wife.
I think you better call your other cousins.